The Tidwell Observation, Part 1, A Still Life in Boston. Rick Tidwell lived a quiet life. He preferred it that way. His house, an aging brick row home wedged neatly between two others, sat on a nondescript street in the Dorchester neighborhood of Boston. The shutters creaked when the wind came in from the harbor, and the front steps sloped slightly to the left. He had lived there for 17 years, and he knew every chipped brick, every humming radiator tick in winter, every creaky floorboard by heart. He worked remotely as a freelance editor for technical manuals. Dry work, but it paid the bills and kept him surrounded by the one thing he trusted most: silence. Most of his days began the same way. He would rise at exactly 7:15 a.m., brew strong black coffee, feed his aging tabby cat Yarrow, and sit at his window with a folded newspaper. Not because he liked the news, but because it gave the appearance of someone engaged with the world. It was on one of these otherwise meaningless mornings that Rick noticed the van. No company logo, no movers, just a long white vehicle with no windows pulling up to the house next door, the one that had been vacant for nearly 8 months. It was 3:47 a.m. Rick rubbed the sleep from his eyes and squinted through the blinds. He could just make out two figures emerging from the back. A man and a woman. They didn't speak, didn't check their surroundings. The man opened the front door without a key. The woman carried nothing, but walked with stiff, upright posture, shoulders perfectly square. Rick watched for 10 full minutes, waiting for boxes, bags, furniture, anything. None came. The lights in the house flickered on, then off, then on again in erratic pulses. Then everything went dark. The van pulled away, soundless on the wet pavement. The next morning, Rick stood on his porch longer than usual, sipping his coffee and pretending to read the front page. The house next door was still. Curtains drawn. No car in the driveway. A single dead fern on the windowsill. Around 9 a.m., the man came outside. Early 40s, Rick guessed. Clean cut, wearing a perfectly ironed polo shirt and khaki slacks, like he'd read about suburban norms and dressed accordingly. He walked to the edge of the lawn, looked left, then right, then knelt and ran his fingers through the grass. Then he waved at Rick. It wasn't a casual wave. It was rigid, rehearsed, hand held high, 5 fingers extended like a child told to show their palm. Rick nodded back cautiously. A few minutes later, the woman emerged, pale, sharp-featured, with blonde hair that didn't quite fall naturally. She stood on the porch, holding a garden hose, but pointed it at nothing. The water ran over the porch steps for almost 5 minutes before she turned it off. Then they both went inside. Rick wrote it off as harmless eccentricity. New people were always a little off. Maybe they were European. Maybe they were trying too hard. But the oddities continued. They collected their mail, but never opened it. They jogged at precisely 3:33 every afternoon, taking the exact same path around the block, their strides identical. Once, Rick watched them wave goodbye to a car that wasn't there. The oddest moment came a week later, when Rick saw the man mowing the lawn, in the rain. A steady, cold Boston drizzle, and the man pushed the mower back and forth, expressionless. The grass wasn't even long. Rick tried to ignore it. He wasn't the kind to meddle. But the details nagged at him like a splinter under skin. They were just off, not in a weird neighbor way, but in a deeper, uncanny sense. Like actors reading from a script they didn't fully understand. He began keeping a notebook. Part 2. The Strange Neighbors. Rick Tidwell wasn't a paranoid man. At least, he didn't think he was. But every day that passed, the Marlowes gave him new reasons to question reality. Or at least question them. He'd taken to sitting by the window with his coffee for longer stretches. What began as a passing curiosity had shifted into ritual. At precisely 3:33 p.m., the Marlowes emerged from their home. Always in the same clothes, neutral-toned tops, jeans that looked brand new and unworn, spotless sneakers. They walked around the block, always counterclockwise, at a metronomic pace. Their arms swung with just the slightest delay, like the rhythm was being fed to them a fraction too late. Rick began recording them on his phone. He noticed they never spoke during their walks. Not to each other, not to neighbors. And they never acknowledged others. Unless someone expected them to. The mail carrier said hi one day. Elise Marlowe turned, paused, and said, "We accept the weather," then walked away. Rick wrote it down, underlined it twice. That Friday evening, something new. Rick sat at his desk, staring at the screen, but reading none of the words. Yarrow, asleep on the radiator, twitched gently in her dreams. The window was cracked open for the breeze, but Rick heard no wind, just silence. It was 9:12 p.m. Drawn by instinct more than intent, Rick stepped to the window. The curtains parted like a ritual, and there in the Marlowe's house, two silhouettes stood in the living room. Their heads were bowed, their bodies still. Between them, floating inches above the coffee table, was something glowing. It pulsed blue. Soft at first, like candlelight underwater, but then brighter, too bright for its size. The thing spun slowly, without any apparent mechanism. It cast no shadows. It hummed. Rick's breath caught. He knelt down just under the window ledge. Heart pounding. By the time he worked up the courage to look again, the light was gone. The room was empty. Saturday morning, Rick tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a trick of light. Maybe they were playing with some kind of art installation or projection. But when he looked out the window again, something had changed. The Marlowe's house was dark. Curtains drawn. No jog at 3:33. No porch lights. No sound. Rick stared at the front steps and realized there were no footprints. The rain had turned the ground to mud the night before, but the steps were spotless, untouched, like they had vanished without ever stepping outside. By Sunday, Rick gave in. He opened his laptop and searched. Blue orb device in house. Levitating glowing object silent. Neighbors disappeared. Glowing light Boston. After a few dead links and forums about haunted mirrors and cryptids in Ohio, he found something buried on the 5th page of results. A link titled Echoes of the Blue Light, documenting the quiet disappearances. The website was crude, black background with pixelated white text and a strange glyph in the corner that flickered when hovered over. Rick clicked. The site's homepage had just one message. You are not the only one who's seen it. Part 3. The Deep Dive. The forum was crude, like something designed in the early 2000s and left untouched since. A black background, pixelated white font, and threads with titles like They Took My Brother in 97, Same Blue Orb, Echo Patterns, Voices After the Light, Devices in Every City Now, Not Aliens, Something Worse. Rick lurked at first, reading for hours, scrolling through posts both paranoid and eerily familiar. It was easy to write most of them off as delusion, but scattered throughout were patterns, repeats, details that matched his exact experience. A user named LanternGirl47 wrote, "They mimic at first, poorly. You'll notice it in the little things, too much eye contact, copying speech without tone. Then they broadcast. If you saw the orb, it's already too late." Another thread caught his eye. "Help me identify the device. Video attached." Rick clicked. The grainy footage showed a man filming from behind a fence. In the distance, inside a dimly lit garage, two figures stood before a pulsing blue sphere. It floated in front of them, rotating with impossible balance. Geometric lines flared across its surface like circuitry made of light. Rick's blood ran cold. It was the exact device. He stared at it frame by frame, frozen by the realization. These weren't isolated events. There were others. Others who'd seen it. Others who'd watched people vanish. One comment on the video stood out. They're recording. Not just light or sound, something deeper. And once the download is complete, they disappear. Rick scrolled back up and finally created an account. Boston Observer 33. He posted his story, kept it factual, described the neighbors, the walks, the phrases, the device, the disappearance. 10 minutes later, he got a message. Sarah_Wilkes. You saw the orb? Where? Rick hesitated, then typed. Next door, Boston. They're gone now. What is it? Sarah replied almost immediately. Not here, not safe. Video call tonight, 8 p.m. I'll explain everything. That night, Rick sat in the dark with his laptop camera on, his face bathed in blue-white light. The video call flickered to life. 6 people joined. Most didn't use cameras, just icons, usernames, vague voices. Sarah Wilkes was visible. Mid-30s, sharp eyes. Her room was dim, covered in printouts and hand-scrawled notes taped to the wall behind her. "It's not a weapon," she began. "It's a recorder, but not like anything we know." Someone interrupted. "Oh, here we go. Alien tech again." "No," said another voice. "Project Echo was real. This is surveillance. They're testing cognitive replication." Sarah held up a photo, blurry, but unmistakably the blue orb. "Think about it," she continued. "They mimic us, right? Learn our behavior. The orb records how we behave, not just what we do, but what we feel doing it. They're building something, a model, maybe of us, maybe of everything." Another user, icon only, spoke. "You're assuming it's aliens. Then what do you think it is?" Rick asked. "Government psyop," came the reply. "Could be AI training, deep models for future simulations." Or, someone added quietly, "It's something trying to become us." That silence held for too long. Sarah ended the call with a warning. "If you've seen it, they've already seen you. Watch for strangers, especially the ones who ask questions that don't make sense." Rick logged off. His hands trembled slightly. He hadn't realized until that moment just how truly afraid he was. Then came the knock on his door. Just one, a single, polite knock. Rick stood slowly. Through the peephole, a young woman stood alone on the porch. Pale, straight hair, blank expression. Dressed for the weather, but not for the century. She smiled without moving her eyes. "Hi," she said when he opened the door a crack. "Are you Rick?" "Yes," he answered, immediately regretting it. "Can I ask you something?" "What?" She leaned forward slightly. "What does forgiveness taste like?" Part 4. The visitor. Rick didn't answer right away. He stared through the crack in the door at the young woman on his porch, every nerve in his body taut. The light from the hallway buzzed faintly behind him. Outside, the air was still. "What does forgiveness taste like?" she'd asked, softly, calmly, like she was asking for the time. Rick blinked. I don't understand." She tilted her head, studying him with unsettling patience. Her eyes didn't quite focus on his. It was like she was trying to match the way humans make eye contact, but hadn't perfected the subtlety. "I'm conducting a brief study," she said, "regarding emotional contrasts in real time." She reached into her coat pocket, not aggressively, but Rick's breath caught anyway. She pulled out a notepad, old-fashioned, lined paper, stiff spiral at the top. She flipped to a page filled with erratic notes. Rick couldn't read any of it, but the shapes weren't entirely English. "We've recorded tastes for regret, joy, suspicion," she said, reading from her notes. "We're missing forgiveness." "You need to leave," Rick said flatly. She looked up again. Her smile was gentle, but frozen. "Are you aware of the broadcast parameters in this area?" she asked. "Or are you observing only passively?" That did it. Rick slammed the door. He paced the hallway for nearly 20 minutes after that, palms sweating, ears straining for any sound. But there was nothing. No footsteps, no knock, no car pulling away. Eventually, he crept back to the front window and peeked between the blinds. The porch was empty. That night, Rick couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch with the television on mute, watching static images of old commercials loop through infomercial hell. Yarrow curled beside him, twitching again in her sleep. Around 2 a.m., the headache began, a deep, pulsing throb that started at the base of his skull and worked forward. He sat up, dizzy, and stumbled into the kitchen to find water. But the moment he reached the sink, the pain intensified, sharp now, blinding. He dropped to his knees, clutching the counter. Then, blackness. Rick woke up, strapped to a chair. The room was enormous, metallic, without corners. The ceiling vanished into darkness. Cold air drifted like vapor across the floor. There were no visible walls, just endless black, speckled with pale lights. like being suspended between stars. And there were beings, 3 of them, tall, silver gray, skin like sculpted marble, not grotesque, almost beautiful. Their eyes were too wide, their faces symmetrical in a way that made them feel manufactured. They didn't speak, and yet Rick understood them. Images filled his mind, fractals of thought, memories wrapped in symbols. He could feel their questions before they formed. It was like a dream inside a dream. They weren't asking him for information. They were gently removing it. Rick tried to move. The restraints held firm. Then, one of them approached with the orb. It wasn't glowing. Not yet. The being held it over Rick's temple. It hovered there for a beat, too. Then a soft, sharp pulse of blue light surged outward. And Rick remembered everything. Everything from them. Their arrival, their experiments, their catalogue of human responses, expressions, dialects, the hundreds they'd studied, then implanted back into society. The Marlows, the blogger from Minnesota, the forum users who'd stopped posting. They weren't dead, they were replacements. And now, so was he. Part 5. The Turn. Rick woke up in his kitchen. The overhead light hummed softly. A half-drunk glass of water sat on the counter beside him. Outside the window, dawn was just breaking, bleeding gray light over the neighborhood. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then he looked at his hands. He turned them over slowly. They looked like his. They felt like his. But something was off. Not wrong, exactly. Just disconnected. Like he was holding gloves shaped like his skin. He stood up. Walked to the bathroom. Stared in the mirror. Rick Tidwell looked back. But Rick didn't feel like Rick anymore. The first real clue came at 9:37 a.m. when he opened his fridge and realized he didn't remember how to feel hungry. He saw food, knew it was food, knew how to prepare it, but there was no drive behind it, no craving. He made toast anyway, burnt it, ate it with a mechanical calm. Later that day, he walked his usual route around the block. He smiled at a neighbor, said hello. She waved back politely. No hesitation, it worked. His stride was the right pace, his voice the right pitch, his posture correct. All of it learned, calibrated, executed. But it wasn't him doing it. It was something inside, pulling strings, wearing skin like a mask. And that mask was holding just fine. Until Sarah Wilkes showed up. She arrived around 4:15, unannounced. Rick saw her through the peephole. She was scanning the street, clutching a messenger bag to her chest, eyes sharp and nervous. He opened the door a few inches. "Rick?" she asked. Her voice cracked a little. He nodded. "Hey, what are you doing here?" She hesitated. Then, "Something's wrong. You stopped messaging. And when I traced the login from your last post, it routed through 3 different proxies. That wasn't you." Rick stared, blank. "That's not something most people would know how to do," she added. He smiled. Must have been a glitch. She studied him. Really studied him. "Say something weird," she whispered. "What?" "Something spontaneous. Anything. A word that doesn't belong." He frowned, confused, or at least pretending to be. Elephant." Sarah's eyes welled with tears. "You're not him." Before he could respond, she jammed a small black device into his neck. It sparked, then hissed. Rick dropped instantly. The last thing he saw before everything faded was Sarah standing over him, trembling, saying, "I'm sorry. I know it's not your fault." Then blackness again. And far away, in the sky above Boston, a low hum began to rise. Part 6. The Sky Breaks. Somewhere in the distance, Rick heard humming. It began as a low vibration, felt more in the chest than the ears. Then it swelled, grew richer, like an unseen chorus resonating with the earth itself. He opened his eyes, or thought he did. There was only blue. Not sky, not ocean. Just a void of light, thick and quiet. Then it blinked out. Rick lay in the middle of his living room. Same carpet, same tilted photo on the wall. Yarrow sat nearby, tail swishing slowly, watching him like she didn't quite recognize her owner. He sat up. His limbs felt lighter, thoughts clearer, almost too clear. Everything around him appeared sharper than he remembered. Every detail crisp, saturated. Time moved differently. like frames of a film threading forward under invisible hands. The hum hadn't stopped, it was louder now. Outside, the sky had darkened, though it was only late afternoon. Clouds clustered in unnatural formations, perfect geometric shapes rotating ever so slightly. The air was still, too still. No birds, no wind, no people on the sidewalks. Just the sound, now layered, harmonic, eerie, and the lights. Tiny blue specks formed along the skyline. At first only a dozen, then hundreds, then thousands. They hovered like silent stars descending, dipping low over rooftops, alleys, trees. Each one pulsed, syncing with the others like breath shared between machines. Sarah Wilkes stood in the middle of the street, staring up. Her coat flapped softly in the motionless air. She wasn't alone. Others emerged from homes, cars, buildings, phones still in hand. Everyone had stopped what they were doing. They all stared at the same thing. The lights began to move, not erratically, not randomly. They were choosing, drifting down with precision, some toward people, others toward structures, some vanishing entirely through the earth. Sarah's voice cracked in a whisper. "It's not an invasion." She turned, just once, toward Rick's house. He stood at the window, staring back, but he didn't wave, didn't blink, just watched, expressionless, like the Marlowes had. And then, a flash, silence. The sky was empty, just clouds. The wind returned. A dog barked in the distance. Sarah sat in the middle of the road, alone. She breathed hard, looked around. No lights, no Rick, no one. Or maybe everyone was still there, just different now.